I'm sorry. Yes, I'm not going to do my usual banter, and boy, would I love to give it to him. But Mark and I have known each other for a very long time, and I just want to say how much we appreciate him coming back every year. Last year, Mark was actually responsible for putting on he had his hands in 4 seminars, directly 3 and peripherally on another that he did participate in. And this year he's only doing 1. I don't know what's going on, but Mark, we want to thank you. Early American Coppers wishes to express sincere gratitude to you for graciously presenting this seminar, Colonial American Conder Tokens, at our convention.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate that. There was one thing I was a little concerned about, though.
Here it comes.
When we were talking a few weeks ago about a topic that I could do,
yes,
and you suggested maybe something on condors.
I did.
You did.
Okay.
And I wasn't quite sure how that was going to fit into the realm of early American coppers. And I also knew nothing about condors.
You lying weasel.
But,
You said
you know,
everything about condors.
well, I learned a lot. And I found out that, you know, condors come in varieties.
Okay.
Like this one's 62.
This is what we're talking, the birds, huh? Yeah. The birds.
Well, what did you mean?
I thought it was going to be like copper, brown.
What? You mean I put together the wrong talk?
Did we spell it wrong? I think it's with an E.
No, condors are with an O.
Your condors are. Oh, no. I thought you were going to get the bird talk.
Okay, so we now know that Conder the bird is spelled with an O and Conder the token is spelled with an E. Okay, so which is, I think, important to know.
You're insane.
Love you, man. The New York Theater token is the first one that I've displayed up here. It's listed in the Red Book, like all of the Conder tokens that we'll talk about today. New York's Park Theater actually opened on January 29th, 1798, and they opened with the Shakespeare play, As You Like It. It's interesting on this particular token that for many years, people had suggested that it was dates to 1796. However, it's my understanding that the gentleman that actually produced these tokens, and they're attributed to Peter Skidmore, did not go into business until 1797. So we know it couldn't have been made in 1796. It was probably made either in 1797 or 1798. These had also often thought to be admission tokens for people attending the theater. But today we're pretty sure that that is not the case, simply because virtually every one that's known is very high grade. They're generally found with a proof surface. They're usually found in, much like this one, in full proof condition or full mint state condition, if you will, rather than pieces that are quite well worn. So that would indicate that they were probably made for collectors. Now, I'm going to tell you that even though I was joking with Chuck, I actually don't know a great deal about Conder tokens. I've learned quite a bit putting this talk together. I look at a couple of the people that are here today and see people that are certainly more knowledgeable than I am about them. What I found, though, as I was studying the tokens, I found it was very convenient to have actually a county map of England handy, so that when I would look at different tokens and they're made in different counties, I could actually get a visual feel for where that is. So one of the suggestions I have for anybody that's thinking about collecting the Conder tokens is to have a map like this, and you can find many different maps that are similar to this on the internet. Just do a Google search for England counties and there you go. This is very, very handy to have. the English government discontinued their production of regal copper pieces in 1775. And they did not start again until 1797. Because of the absence of the copper, the halfpennies, or the pennies that were in circulation, this paved the way for many private token manufacturers to produce their own tokens, sometimes advertising, sometimes with various different political or satirical motives. But they were at first produced basically to fill the void for copper that was not available in circulation. Well, then they quickly became collector's items. The collectors of the time noticed them, and it was a fellow by the name of James Conder, C-O-N-D-E-R, who actually wrote a very early reference on the different types of tokens that were in circulation. And I want to say that his reference came out, I believe, in 1798. And what that did essentially is during that time, the private manufacturers, they more or less started a game of anything you can do, I can do better. And there were a number of different manufacturers that all produced their various tokens for collector's items. Among those was the Kentucky token. This was actually a token produced in Lancashire County. And these tokens have been given various names over the years. In the 19th century, they were sometimes called the triangle piece. Breen called them the starry pyramid halfpence. But most people refer to them as the Kentucky token, primarily because the letter K for Kentucky is at the very top of the triangle of the pyramid of stars. These tokens date from the period 1792 to 1796. Again, they don't carry a date on the coins or on the tokens, but we know that they date to this period because of when the different states entered the Union. So because Kentucky is the 15th state and there are 15 states represented, we can date it to approximately the 4-year period from 92 to 96. There are a number of different varieties, primarily with different edge devices. Some of you may not have gotten the handout that I had for everybody, so if you didn't get a copy of this, if we could pass it out to those that haven't gotten it yet. You'll notice on the back, I've included the various edge inscriptions on the sheet. And it will give you all the different varieties of the Kentucky tokens and all the other various tokens that were produced. So hopefully you'll find this to be of a quick little reference for these tokens. The next is the so-called Franklin Press token. I think, Dennis, you had a comment about this, that they just borrowed the name Franklin, more or less?
Well, I think they had the press that Franklin used.
Mm-hmm.
They used it as a publicity item, which then became, basically an advertisement piece. As I recall, it's written up in one of the little paperback books about Franklin pieces,
mm-hmm.
as I recall.
Yeah, so these, I think they were basically advertising tokens for the business, and they were in fact taking advantage of Franklin using the press. So it makes sort of an interesting story. They were probably made for circulation. I think most of them are found in circulated grades, if I'm not mistaken.
A lot are high grade too, though. There are a lot of, all these pieces are found in some stage of red and brown unk.
Okay, so they could have been made specifically for collectors, and it might have been made for circulation and for advertising or trade purposes.
I think all these things were struck for the collectors who were primarily the nobility and the clergy. They have survived in incredible condition, given the damn country of England, mm-hmm. all the time that's gone by.
Then we move along to the October plebis token, which may not be an actual Conder token. They're, like all of these, are listed in the Red Book, so they are of interest to American collectors. These are probably evasion pieces, most likely.
Yeah. And there's the definition, if you want to get strict, is Dalton and Hammer are basically the Conder book.
Right.
There's another book, ancient book, Atkins, circa 1892 that lists everything you could ever think of.
Mm-hmm.
And some are cross-listed and some aren't. And there's a book by Cobweb, which is part of that, different set of numbers. But all that kind of embodies what I call American colonial tokens produced in England.
Right,
Maybe
right.
a more accurate description of what you have here.
I think it probably is. There, Breen also listed a number of different mules that had various different reverses. I think one with North Wales and Hispaniola, and those are probably almost certainly part of the Evasion series.
Like I have three of those with me. Three you described as extremely rare. I have it in my pocket.
Great. Okay.
You're calling them invasion?
Evasion.
Evasion,
Meaning that the legends didn't match the regal copper, and hence you were not being prosecuted for being a counterfeit.
So basically exactly, the purpose was to evade the counterfeit laws, therefore they called them the evasion coppers.
Now, just on that particular coin, the date is never full if it's centered. And that's sort of like the holy grail of collecting that token, because it's relatively common.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever see a full date, then that's got to be an impossible rarity, because if it's centered, it'll never fit.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just as a aside.
Another interesting piece that may or may not be a true Conder token, though, is the Middleton token. These were struck in both silver and copper. They were produced by Bolden and Watt at their Soho Mint in Birmingham. But they're not listed in Dalton and Hammer. So are they Conder tokens or are they not? They were apparently intended as pattern pieces for Philip Middleton's British settlement in Kentucky. But then Bolden ended up selling them to collectors. He also muled them with certain reverses of the Upper Canada token. So there's a few different varieties. And most people, I guess, consider them part of the Conder series today. They are fairly highly collectible. They're also quite expensive when you find them. And they're a sort of a fascinating token. Probably, though, what I would call the true American colonial Conder token is none other than the Talbot, Allen, and Lee token. These are certainly the most well-known pieces among collectors in this country. The firm was operated by three gentlemen, William Talbot, William Allen, and James Lee. And they were importers of goods from India. And they were located in lower New York City. They actually placed the order for all of their tokens with Peter Kempson of Birmingham. And I don't know how many were originally made, but the quantity must have been huge, probably many hundreds of thousands of tokens, especially considering what we'll learn in just a minute about the 1795 tokens. But in 1794, there were two varieties. The first variety is shown here. It does not have the words New York on it, and these are quite rare. There have been various estimates that maybe anywhere between 20 and 100 of these exist. I've seen some people say only 20 or 25 pieces are known. I've seen others say that 50 to 100 are known. The exact number is certainly very small, and they're certainly very desirable. The next variety is with New York, and you can see the words New York right above the ship. These are quite plentiful. There are two reverse varieties known with either large ampersand or small ampersand in the Talbot, Allen, and Lee. They come with a plain edge, and they come with various lettered edges. The primary edge inscription, I believe, says payable at the store of Talbot, Allen, and Lee. They were strictly American tokens. But then the people that made them, I guess they decided to make some additional pieces for collectors in Britain. But first of all, we'll talk about also the 1795 Talbot, Allen, and Lee token. This is interesting because, again, the quantity was very large, but the firm did not actually distribute many of these tokens at all. most of them were sold to the U.S. Mint. So in 1795, they supposedly sold 1,076 pounds of these tokens at 18 cents per pound. And the mint used them to produce copper, primarily half cents, I believe. You can often find 1795 and 97 half cents with considerable undertype from the Talbot Elliman Lee tokens. And those are highly desirable among half-cent collectors. Apparently, from what I understand, there was another group of tokens that they sold the following year to the mint, another roughly 1,900 pounds. So essentially, they sold 3,000 pounds of these tokens to the Philadelphia Mint over a period of 2 years. That, I believe, works out to about 140,000 individual tokens. So the mint had quite a supply of these. They were thrilled because they had trouble getting copper, so they were absolutely delighted to have these tokens.
But they had to actually cut the planches down.
They had to cut the planches down to produce the half cents. The alternative was to actually melt them down and produce new strip. Because we know the existence of pieces that show the Talbot Elliman Lee undertype, we know that at least with some part of them, they actually cut them down to half-cent diameter and then struck them with the half-cent dies.
It's very labor-intensive.
Extremely. I'm not sure I would have wanted to be the person doing the cutting of the individual pieces. It would have taken quite a bit of dexterity. I'd mentioned that the makers of the Talbot Elliman Lee pieces also created various mules for collectors. There were a number of these. This is has the Talbot Elliman Lee obverse, as all the mules do. And in this particular case, it has the Birmingham halfpenny reverse. Now, it's interesting, you've got the 1794 date on the obverse, and you've got a 1793 date on the reverse. So you've actually got a double dated piece, which I find is fascinating. These pieces, the reverse were actually, the Birmingham halfpennies were actually made in Warwickshire. So it was a combination of dies from 2 different locations. You also have mules that have the stork reverse. I believe that these are probably the most common of the mules. They're seen, to my knowledge, more frequently than any of the others. And all of these pieces were made strictly for collectors. Another mule has Earl Howe, and it was part of the Hampshire series. And John Howard, it was also part of the Hampshire series. And those are all the mules with the 1794 obverse date. After those, there were 2 mules that had the 1795 Talbot Elliman Lee obverse. The Blofield Cavalry Mule, which has quite a fascinating bit of engraving on the die. And these were part of the Norfolk series of Conder tokens. And the major rarity among the mules are the York Cathedral pieces. And there are perhaps a dozen or so of these known, if I'm not mistaken. So these are the ones that most collectors have not been able to locate. Going on in this series of the tokens, the Washington pieces. This is the large eagle sand, which is a relatively plentiful variety. It is said that these were actually produced to go with a British proposal for striking American coinage for our country. They wanted to actually receive a coinage contract so that they could provide coins for the country so we wouldn't have to produce or have to build our own mint and provide our own coinage. Well, Washington and Jefferson and some of the others were totally against the idea for a lot of different reasons. Also, these dies depict Washington on the obverse, and he was absolutely against having his portrait on the early U.S. coins. So this idea for a contract coinage was totally against Washington's wishes. In fact, it was not actually until the 1900s that American presidents finally appeared on our coins. This particular variety is known as the large eagle cent. I understand that there were about 2,500 of these approximately that were shipped to this country to be distributed to various people for the plants to have the contract. There was also another variety known as the small eagle cent, and it is believed that about 1,500 of the small eagle cents were also shipped to this country. I have no doubt that there were many more that were produced in England and stayed in that country. Because Washington objected to these pieces and objected to having his portrait on the coinage, the engraver, John Gregory Hancock, produced another piece called the Roman head cent. Now, I don't actually have a slide of that in the presentation, but it's illustrated in the Red Book. And the Roman head cent is an extremely rare piece that Breen called Hancock's revenge. He said that Hancock produced these pieces in response to Washington's objections or rejection of his earlier pieces. So it's sort of an interesting story, and when you look at it, the actual obverse, the portrait, it kind of looks like Washington with a Roman look to his portrait. So they're fascinating pieces. A few other small issues which were again made as part of the Conder series. The Liverpool halfpenny. Again, it takes the Washington's portrait from the obverse of the Washington cents and combines it with the Liverpool halfpenny that has the ship design. These, I think there are probably about 20 of these known, just approximately. And Dennis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but these are generally found very well worn.
That's the case, yeah.
And
I've seen it been well worn.
those that I've seen are also quite well worn. That would indicate that they may have been made actually for circulation at the time rather than for advertising or other purposes.
But isn't it kind of amazing that this circulated in England,
Right?
honored the U.S. president 10 years after the war? Like, I've never been able to compute this in my mind. Why would you circulate a picture of your enemy?
It is kind of a fascinating thought, and I'm not sure I have the answer for that.
The English were very American sympathetic because they didn't like the monarchy. I mean, you got this king that's going in and out of insanity.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of chaos, and then you have this imposition of martial law for a large period of time. So there were a lot of dissatisfactions, and you got the French Revolution going on,
Mm-hmm.
showing
Yeah.
success. So it wasn't a
Not a total stretch. So
But again, producing that appears to be treasonable, or at least
perhaps,
in that
but,
kind of environment.
well, they
King would have intervened and said, hey, what is this?
you would think so, but they didn't stop there. They also produced the ship halfpenny. Now these are generally found a little bit higher grade than the Liverpool halfpennies, and they're much more plentiful. Whether they were again made for circulation or made for political reasons, I really don't know for sure. The general higher grade of pieces might suggest that they were made more for political reasons. Another piece that it is generally thought that they were made for a potential coinage contract proposal were the Liberty and Security pennies. Now, there are a couple of varieties of the pennies. The common ones are found without a date on the or without a date whatsoever. There are also extremely rare pieces of the 1 penny. They have the 1795 date. These were made in Birmingham. At the time in 1795, the Philadelphia Mint was going through some difficulties. There were some challenges to whether the country really needed a mint or not. And the word of these difficulties got back to the British. So once again, they tried to renew the thought of doing a contract coinage for America. And of course, we know that that never actually happened. Along with the Liberty and Security pennies were also the Liberty and Security halfpennies, which are, even though they don't show here different, they were smaller in size. There are a number of these pieces of various edge varieties. Again, I've listed all of them that I'm aware of on the sheet that we passed out. So that should give you quite a bit of information on the different varieties that are in existence. There was also, with the Liberty and Security, there was a piece that had the Liberty and Security reverse muled with an Irish halfpenny obverse. These were obviously intended for collectors. It was another one of the pieces that were produced during the I can do it better than you can period of time. And these are seen frequently in this country. They're not listed, to the best of my knowledge, in the Red Book, but they are, I think, in Breen's encyclopedia. A further piece, and these were intended strictly as advertising pieces. These are known as the Great Halfpennies of 1795. They advertised London's firm of Clark and Harris, and they were clearly produced as a trade piece to advertise the firm. There are two varieties of these. The small buttons pieces are usually found fairly well worn, and then what's shown here is the large buttons piece, and these are found normally in higher grades. What's known as the Repub Ameri, or the Washington Republic America medal, is another piece that's attributed to the Conder token series. I don't believe these are listed in Dalton and Hammer, but they are part of that series of tokens made, in this case again in Birmingham. They were...
Middlesex numbers, they probably do.
Oh, I guess, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it probably is. My apologies, and it probably is listed in Dalton and Hammer then. These were almost certainly intended for collectors. I do not know much more about them. Some of the sources that I checked, there's not a great deal of information about these tokens whatsoever.
That's kind of underappreciated, that they're sort of on the fringe.
They are without a doubt.
What does the writing say?
Well, it basically is a brief little biography of Washington's life. It says that he was the general of the American armies in 1775. He resigned in, 1783. President of the United States, 1789. And then resigned the presidency, 1796. So basically, it's just a very brief biography, if you will, of the important points in Washington's life.
But it's just a kind of almost funeral medal in more abbreviated form on the reverse, more Virginia. It's like the resume of
Right, exactly.
life history, I guess.
Another piece that may be part of the Conder series, or more likely as part of the Evasion series, is the North Wales piece. Now, it's listed in Dalton and Hammer. However, I think most people really consider it to be an Evasion halfpence. These are generally found in lower grades because they were produced in lower grades. They were actually produced from dies that had incomplete die work. And so if you find a piece that grades extremely fine, that would be an extremely high quality example. I believe most of these probably spend quite a bit of time in circulation, so it's not unusual to find them in grades of good or very good. Perhaps what I think is one of the most important series of Conder tokens, though, and these really do not get much attention in the United States as perhaps they should, but there's a series of Thomas Paine tokens. And Dave Bowers recently included them in his new book on colonials, his Colonial Encyclopedia. Most of the past authors and catalogers, Breen doesn't mention them whatsoever in his encyclopedia, nor are they mentioned in any of the other standard references that I know of. But there are a number of different varieties. I've listed quite a few of them with the Dalton and Hammer numbers on the handout. They're essentially combinations of political and satirical tokens. They were probably made for collectors, although this example shows quite a bit of wear. If you look at the pictures of the pieces in the new Bowers Encyclopedia, most of those he shows fairly high-grade pieces. This is a series that I think Ken Brissett is doing quite a bit of research on right now, and my understanding is he may be including them in future editions of the Red Book, space permitting.
You know, they are listed in, remember Sullivan's book on American political tokens.
Okay.
I think he lists that as the first pieces, but that's how he categorizes as American political pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I did double check that, but I think that's true.
And I think that that's probably a good categorization for them, that that's where they belong. So.
Population like, kind of the end of pain token.
Tokens that are collectors.
Yeah, I think that's
I went-
probably
yeah,
fair.
Well, they're abundant in the sense there aren't enough collectors to put a dent in the supply, and it's hard to put a number on, but the supply is more than there are collectors. They're available.
Mm-hmm.
But yet the paint pieces are very popular collectibles, so they tend to be higher priced compared to their
Yeah,
rarity.
but then again,
Yeah.
all the condors you saw are off the chart compared to an ordinary condor.
Right, exactly.
This is a $25,000 condor versus a $200 condor.
Mhm. Right.
Same grade.
There are so many of the British condors, and I think, do you have some of them at your table? I know I've seen quite a few of them on the Bourse floor here.
Yeah, I don't have them. I've sort of gone in and out of condors. I collected them for a while and got tired of them, but I was fascinated by the condition
Mm-hmm.
15 years ago, the fact that they got preserved as red unks.
And 15 years ago, those were what, $50?
Yeah, they're 50s.
Yeah.
It's very affordable. You go to England, you go to Coventry Market, you couldn't believe how many red unks were available for no money.
Mm-hmm.
Then all of a sudden your brain got overloaded. You got the book and say, oh my God, there's like 25,000 varieties.
Right.
Like who can deal with this? But the truth is the Congress Society, there's just a whole collecting branch that looks at this. And again, I've been fascinated by the preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned before, the upper class, the clergy, the lords, this was like their magic cards. This is what they did. The mulings were created. There was a society of people collect this to show them off. And they had cabinets, and they were preserved. Whether it was tissue or what they used, there aren't spots. I mean, think about there were no red unk colonials of the same period.
Right.
Yet there are enormous number of red unk condors.
Mm-hmm.
And that always struck me. It says, how did they get preserved in a damn country for 200 plus years to look as good as this?
The entire Condor token series, and what we've looked at here is just a brief sampling of those that really have appeal to American colonial collectors. But the entire series, I think you could literally spend a lifetime and not even put a dent in what's out there. So it's really a fascinating area. It's an area that, as I mentioned earlier, I do not know a great deal about, but I've learned quite a bit about them recently, and it's certainly an area I could find myself collecting without any trouble whatsoever. And so they're, without a doubt, a fascinating series. Any other questions? No questions. Okay. Michael, you always have a question.
Not a question, but
Or a comment.
that people would like to see. I happen to have 4 condors with me, including a Franklin Press piece.
Okay, great,
If
great.
they'd like to see them, I can have them on here. Because, you know, I've got one piece, a farthing piece, which gives you an idea of what kind of high-grade quality they have. It's a nice unk farthing.
Excellent.
It doesn't actually fit in with these, but it's still a decent piece.
Okay.
I have a question. On the people bidding to create the coinage from Great Britain for here, were those private manufacturers or was it the actual British government?
No, those are private manufacturers. Peter Kempson's men in Birmingham. I'm sure that Bolton and Watt probably had a little bit to do with that. Generally, though, it was actually the smaller manufacturers who were competing with Bolton and Watt, who was the large player in the field. And so the smaller manufacturers were actually looking to get these contracts so that they could be profitable and compete with with Matthew Bolton and his company. So, Richard.
Yeah, do they come in, were they made in different sizes? You know, like most of them are like large cent size or half cent, but then you had like 3-inch ones or 4-inch ones or anything? And also, were they made in different metals of the same tokens?
Most of the Conder tokens were copper. Most of them that I'm familiar with are large cent size. Dennis, do you know of other sizes?
No, I think generally there are some mulings, there are some errors, there might be a splash. They're listed in Dalton and Hammer as extremely rare or one or two known.
There's a lot of farthing size.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Yeah, but that's a different, same style, it's not the same token, it's just
Right.
more die. But again, just think of a collector base, mulings, and demand, just like Civil War tokens. They're off metals, they're high grade, same concept. There's a demand for this stuff, all I gotta do is switch 2 dies and all of a sudden I can
Right.
sell it. And with a nice profit margin.
Sure.
And it was the range to do. So it was like, at that point in time, you can make as many as you want, get your premium out of them, and there's a collector base, whether it was 10 made or 20 made, but they were gone. So it's what goes around comes around. It's an interesting point in time.
Very good.
One to get a start on collecting things. Robbie Brown's Conder token collection is coming up for sale this October.
Oh, is it really?
The first part, anyway. He has probably the most complete collection of Conder tokens, around 4,900 pieces.
Why am I not surprised? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.